The final devastating blow came in the form of an invitation Eli received for a new, prestigious gallery exhibition in London, curated by one of the art world's most powerful figures. The show was titled, The Unseen World, Perspectives of Caleb Finch. Eli was delighted, until he opened the accompanying press release. The exhibition featured a staggering collection of newly discovered, powerful works by Caleb, works that were instantly recognizable to Eli. They were his own unpublished photographs, a haunting portrait of a Bedouin elder, a breathtaking shot of a Siberian tiger with its cub, and a searing photo essay on the last days of a rainforest village. Caleb hadn't just copied the images. He had digitally scanned, subtly cropped, and copyrighted the original negatives as his own. He hadn't just stolen Eli's work. He had stolen Eli's memory. The act was monstrous, but its foundation was simple greed. Caleb knew that while Eli was alive, the master's work was too valuable to counterfeit openly. But if he could establish ownership of these newly discovered masterpieces now, when Eli's health was precarious and his memory often questioned, he would secure a multi-million-dollar fortune and the mantle of the next great photographer, all without having to wait for Eli to die. 2. The Canary Trap. The rage Eli felt was cold, not hot. It was the calculated fury of a man who had stared down civil wars and natural disasters. He didn't want a lawsuit that would dissolve his legacy into a media circus. He didn't want Caleb in jail. That would be too quick an ending. Eli wanted to deliver a consequence that was equal parts public, professional, and poetic. He remembered a security measure he had implemented decades ago, less for protection against theft and more as a test of character: the Canary Trap. When cataloging his most valuable film, Elias had devised a simple, invisible marker, using a specialized archival-grade polymer mixture that was completely transparent. The photographer's last shot, the archive and the apprentice. Eli Vance lived his life through the lens. At 80 years old, his vision was fading, but the images stored in the vast, climate-controlled archive of his Montana ranch were sharp, vibrant, and immortal. He was a legend, a former war correspondent, a chronicler of disappearing cultures, and a nature photographer whose work possessed the gritty truth of a war zone and the ethereal beauty of a wild landscape. His current world was the archive. He spent his days cataloging the negatives of a lifetime, thousands of rolls of film, many of which had never been printed, much less seen by the public. These were his final, most personal treasures, images taken between major assignments, the unguarded moments, the rare wildlife sightings, the faces of people who had trusted him with their vulnerability. This collection, he often thought, was his true will. His apprentice and companion was a young, driven photographer named Caleb Finch. Caleb had arrived 5 years ago, brimming with talent and a flattering, almost worshipful admiration for Eli's work. Eli had trained him, financed him, and given him the keys to the kingdom, literally. Caleb had full access to the archive, the darkroom, and, most importantly, the massive, custom-built steel vault where the original negatives were stored. Eli had come to regard Caleb as the son who would not only inherit his fortune, but, more crucially, his legacy. The betrayal began subtly, almost invisibly, like a slow chemical stain on a pristine negative. Over the past year, Caleb had grown impatient. He wanted the fame, the money, the weight of the Vance name, but he didn't want to wait for nature to run its course. But the damage was done. Reporters were scribbling furiously. Collectors were demanding to know the provenance of every print. Caleb was immediately cornered by his publisher's frantic legal team. His career was over, shattered not by the accusations of an old man, but by the undeniable scientific truth glowing in cobalt blue. Eli left the gallery quietly, without another word, leaning on Alistair and Margaret. He had not pursued charges. He had not demanded prison time. He had simply used the truth to erase the lie. Caleb had gained his freedom, but he had lost the one thing he craved: credibility. 3 months later, Eli transferred all his copyrights and the entire archive into the Vance Foundation for Ethical Photojournalism. The foundation's charter was simple: to fund young, aspiring photographers on the condition that they sign an ironclad ethics pledge that included a zero-tolerance policy for plagiarism and theft. Eli had one final, profound gesture. He had the canary trap, light fixture donated to the foundation's headquarters, where it was permanently installed over a blank wall. It served as a silent, cobalt blue reminder, a warning that in the world of art and truth, every single action, visible or invisible, will eventually be accounted for. Eli Vance didn't just preserve his legacy, he refined it. He taught the world that the ultimate proof of ownership isn't a signature on a contract, but the indelible mark of one's own character. He had taken his last shot, and it was a masterpiece. Then it happened. On the massive, high-definition prints of Caleb's masterpieces, something appeared on the bottom right corner of the emulsion, a faint, unmistakable cobalt blue glow. Tiny, stylized shapes, repeating across every one of the question prints. The honk, a gasp, followed by an aggressive wave of murmurs, swept through the gallery. The glow, invisible moments before, was now clear to everyone with eyes. It was a watermark, a maker's mark, designed to say, "Property of Elias Vance." The curator squinted, then rushed forward, whispering frantically, "Eli, what is this? What is that light?" Eli ignored her. He held up a print of his own, genuine wolf photo. "This is my work. Authentic. Now look." Alistair aimed a small, handheld version of the UV light onto the wolf print. The crowd surged closer. "Note the difference," Eli stated calmly. "My original work, The Hunter's Last Look, shows no such marker. It is a print from a negative before I began cataloging my unreleased work." He pointed back to Caleb's glowing photos. "The photographs you see by Caleb Finch, the Siberian tiger, the Bedouin elder, they are magnificent, but they are printed from negatives marked with my unique, archival-grade canary trap. A marker placed only on the negatives I kept locked in my private vault. A marker that proves, beyond any legal or artistic doubt, that these images were stolen." Caleb finally broke. "It's a lie," he shouted, his voice cracking with panic. "A cheap trick. He's old, his mind is failing. He's jealous." Eli simply looked at him, his face etched with a profound disappointment that was more devastating than any rage. "I am old, Caleb," Eli acknowledged, his voice soft. "But I have never confused a good photograph with the man who stole it. I gave you the keys to my house, my heart, and my legacy. You chose to try and steal the very ground I stood on." 6. The legacy restored. The scene devolved into chaos. The director of the gallery had the lights restored. "The curators love your piece, Eli," Caleb said, eager to move the conversation back to his own success. "It's a perfect centerpiece." "It is," Eli agreed. "It is a genuine centerpiece." As the crowd gathered for the main curator's address, Alistair and a prearranged technical assistant quietly placed a modified lighting fixture high above the central wall, aimed at a large display of Caleb's most valuable works, the Bedouin portrait and the tiger cub image. The fixture looked identical to the surrounding museum spotlights. The curator began her speech, praising Caleb's daring genius and unprecedented intimacy with his subjects. Caleb swelled with pride. This was the moment he had killed his mentor's legacy for. The reckoning. When the curator finished, Eli raised a frail hand. The crowd instantly hushed. "My friends," Eli said, his voice surprisingly strong, though carrying the weary timbre of a man of 80. "I am deeply moved by this exhibition. Caleb is a prodigious talent. But tonight I want to talk about authenticity." He paused, letting the word hang in the expectant air. "A photograph is more than an image," he continued. "It is a legal and moral document. It records light, time, and, most importantly, ownership. I want to show you all a new way to appreciate the truth hidden in a great photograph." He turned and looked directly at Caleb, whose smile had finally begun to dissolve into a sickly apprehension. Eli nodded once to Alistair. Alistair's assistant pressed a discreet button. The bank of normal spotlights, illuminating the central wall of Caleb's stolen work, clicked off. Simultaneously, the modified fixture clicked on. It was silent, and the light looked perfectly normal, save for a subtle shift in the color temperature of the room. Recognizing the cold fire in his friend's eyes, "I'm planning to make a point, Alistair. A point about authenticity." Eli then used his considerable influence to secure a large, central display space at the London exhibition. He told the curator he wanted to display a single print, a never-before-seen image of a solitary wolf, as a symbolic blessing for Caleb's show. The curator, thrilled by the master's involvement, immediately agreed. The plan was set for the opening night of the Unseen World. 4. Opening night. The Tate Modern Gallery in London was a whirlwind of black ties, expensive gowns, and hushed reverence. The air was thick with the scent of champagne and ambition. Caleb Finch, the star of the night, was holding court, surrounded by curators, collectors, and journalists. He looked triumphant. The stolen images, Eli's finest, most intimate work, were displayed on enormous, perfectly illuminated prints hanging on the walls. The critics were already calling him the new Vance, praising his depth, his raw emotion, his unique eye. Eli arrived late, leaning heavily on a cane, escorted by Margaret and Alistair. He moved slowly through the crowd, radiating the frailty of age. Caleb rushed over, full of practiced concern. "Eli, I'm so glad you made it. Look, they love it. Your teaching truly shines through." "It does, Caleb," Eli murmured, his eyes locking on a towering print of the Siberian tiger. "It shines very brightly indeed." He was led to his own small, dedicated wall in the main exhibition hall. Hanging, there was his genuine, newly printed photograph of a lone wolf. Below it, a brass plaque read, "The Hunter's Last Look by Elias Vance, 1998. And harmless to the film, he had painted a microscopic, recognizable pattern, a tiny, stylized hawk, onto the bottom right corner of the emulsion of every negative he designated as unreleased. This polymer had two specific properties. It was imperceptible under normal light and standard printing/scanning techniques. It reacted to a specific wavelength of high-intensity, archival UV light by glowing a faint, unmistakable cobalt blue. Eli retrieved the original negative roll that contained the stolen images. He held it up to the light, then under his proprietary UV lamp. The minuscule cobalt blue hawk glowed faintly on each frame. The images Caleb was displaying as his own were imprinted with Eli's silent, unarguable watermark. He closed the vault. The truth, like the hawk, was now ready to fly. 3. The Grand Lie and the Grand Stage. Eli initiated Phase 1, the deception. He contacted Caleb, his voice carefully calibrated to sound frail and excited. "Caleb, my boy, a gallery show in London. This is magnificent. The work is stunning, truly. You've outdone yourself." Caleb, relieved that the old man was playing the role of the oblivious, proud mentor, was effusive. "Thank you, Eli. It's all thanks to your training, sir. I'm dedicating the show to you." Eli played the part of the fading patriarch perfectly. He gave Caleb his full, public blessing, telling the press he was so proud that my protege has finally found his voice. But while he was praising Caleb, Eli was quietly assembling his own team. He contacted his trusted lawyer, a formidable woman named Margaret, and his oldest friend, Dr. Alistair Finch, a conservationist and expert in archival lighting techniques. "I need you to build me a custom light," Eli instructed Alistair. "A projector powerful enough to fill a large gallery wall, calibrated to a single, specific archival UV wavelength. It must be portable, silent, and look like a standard museum spotlight." "What are you planning, Eli?" Alistair asked,